Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of an unexpected podcast. And on today's podcast, I am joined by Mick and Matt, and we will be going over the Survivors of Laketown faction. And it's going to be a full review of the entire faction. But first, we're going to be going into our list reviews. So for those who don't know, our list reviews, we pull a list from this comment section of YouTube. And our YouTube subscribers can absolutely post on there if you want your list reviewed for maybe an upcoming tournament and such. But also, for those of you who listen on iTunes and Spotify, we do post on there as well. And you can reach out to any of us and we can consider your list for the channel. So with that out of the way, first, Mick, go ahead and share what list are we reviewing today?
All right, so today's list comes from Ian Oates, and he's put together a 750-point Isengard list with 36 warriors, 8 bows, 8 might, 1 banner, and 39 models. It goes, Warband 1 is Saruman. He is mounted on a horse. In his Warband, we have 2 Uruk-hai Berserkers, 4 Uruk-hai warriors with crossbows, 4 warriors with shields, 4 warriors with pikes, and 1 warrior with a banner. Then the second warband is Mauher, leading 6 Uruk-hai scouts with shields and the Marauder upgrade, and 3 Uruk-hai scouts with Uruk bows. Then in the third warband, we have Thrydan Wolfsbane, and he is mounted. He's leading an Uruk-hai Berserker, 4 Uruk-hai warriors with shields, 4 with pike, 1 crossbowman, and 2 warg riders with shields. So additionally, Ian is saying that in this list, we have a mobility and a cheeky alpha strike with light range support. The idea is to utilize Saruman's offensive capabilities to shift enemy heroes and troop lines, utilizing Mauher and his boys to outflank or chase objectives, and playing up the Thrydan plus Saruman lockdown combo to end any hero of your choosing. Warg Riders are there to either screen shots from Thrydan or slink off onto objectives. He's also saying, I'm a huge fan of Mauher, but he tends to disappoint me. Thrydan is a new use for me, and while expensive and a bit squishy, he seems underrated. Mighty Blow with a one-handed sword to when you don't want to risk the two-hander, sign me up. So in this list, as I mentioned before, he has 36 warriors, 39 models in total. So first thing that stands out for me is that Saruman comes without Grima. And this is something that I believe we talked about before, how I believe all three of us always like to bring Grima alongside Saruman. It's almost like it's one of those automatic upgrades because of Grima's special rule, how strong he generally is. Then the other a few things that stand out initially are things like a Uruk-hai with a banner doesn't have a shield or a pike. I'm just wondering, guys, can he carry a pike and a banner together? Or
yes, he can.
Yeah, so the warrior with a banner should always have at least a pike or a shield. And then Ian's saying about how Mauher always seems to disappoint him. Well, I have to kind of agree. I always preferred Ugluk personally because of additional heroic strikes. But yeah, before we go into more details, let's see what else Matt and Devin have to say.
I also, was trying to figure out how we could get Grima into this list because it just seems like you're kind of leaving some stuff on the table if Grima's not in here. And Grima is one of those figures that every once in a while will just win you the game. And so I think I'd like to see Grima. I also, unless you're going to go with one of the legendary legions that, get scouts for free or something like that, I also think I would prefer Ugluk in this list. I have to say the Uruk-hai scouts, when you only get a few of them, and he's only got 6 that are upgraded here, I tend not to be able to get their points, the points out of them. Which isn't to say that they don't have their uses. And the other thing I was thinking was kind of left on the table here was a Crebain or two. And I'm wondering if the Crebain or two might be a better objective grabber here the Warg Riders. And I kind of think they would be. The question is, this is already a bit light on warriors. So then you end up with the question of, well, where do the points for all this come from? And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I am not convinced that Archive Berserkers are worth their points anymore.
No, I fully agree.
And I'm wondering
They always have to go two-handed now, right?
No, I don't think so. I think they have a
just
hand and a
double-check.
half. I think they have a hand and a half. They have a Berserker
We have a
blade,
Berserker blade, yeah.
which is a hand and a half sword, so they don't have to go
Okay.
two-handed. It's just they're 15 points, and taking them down to defense 5 really makes them pretty vulnerable. I mean, I think they're still useful to stand in front of a couple pikes. So I kind of understand why he has 2 Berserkers and 4 pikes in the First Legion, but so I mean, a couple ways you could get points with the Warg Riders with shield. You could delete 2 of them, get a Crabane, and then maybe, or you could just, if you delete those 3 Archive Berserkers, that's 45 points. So that is, I mean, that's Grima and a Crabane at that point. And I think you're probably going to get more use out of Grima and a Crabane than probably those Berserkers. I'd agree to see if I can find a point somewhere to stick a pike on the banner. And it may be that what you can do to save a few points here, if you want to like save a Berserker or throw a pike on the banner, is maybe you downgrade 1 or 2 of the Uruk-hai warriors to ordinary orcs, and that saves you a few points, and that's probably all you're going to need if you're going to delete maybe a couple Berserkers to save the 3rd and do what you want to do.
All right. So just one thing for Grima, if he charges but then chooses not to strike blows, does he reveal himself?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He does. So I'm correct, surrounding him with 3 guys means he can't move for the rest of the game.
It does, although you don't have the obligation to deploy him with your opponent's warband. You can deploy him with your own warband, in which case he is revealed and he can be charged and shot at and stuff, but you can kind of hide him behind the battle line. And then he just, follows Saruman around or Mahur around or Thryden around and soaks might off of people. And that's often the better way to go with Grima, is to deploy him behind your own lines and, forget about him being a 5th columnist. Put him behind your own lines, and that he can be really hard to get rid of.
Okay. All right. I haven't used him as much in the new edition. I know he hasn't changed too much, so I don't have too many comments on Grima. I can agree that a Crabane and Grima will probably have more use for you than the Berserkers. My only fear is that his line is going to start becoming really light. Like, because I'm looking at it, and most of his army, he's got 36 warriors at 750 points. So he's already kind of less than what most 750 point armies, not by much, but less still. And then most of his army is defense like 5, with the exception of a few shields. I'm trying to figure out how big the shield wall will be, but it's not very large. It seems like he's throwing the pikes behind the Berserkers, and that seems to be the goal here. Well, except for in the final warband, where I think he's got them behind every shield, one behind every shield, and then he's got a Berserker sort of on the flank somewhere. He's got a good, healthy mix of things. I do think that the Crabane are going to serve a better purpose than the Warg Riders. I mean, obviously, the Warg Riders have more potential to actually kill something. If you do Matt's idea of swapping out the Berserkers for Crabane and Grima, then I'm not sure. Well, actually, I guess I could still see the value of keeping the Warg Riders. It's really the Mahur group that kind of annoys me about the list. Like, I see the function he's trying to add here, and they technically, the Marauders are like, how many points are a Marauder?
Well, so they're 9 points plus a shield, so that's 10 points. And an Uruk-hai
10
warrior
points, so that's the exact same
is
cost as
9.
a regular Uruk.
Yeah. So
They're the ones I'm kind of struggling with.
Yeah.
Is that with the upgrade or without the upgrade? Hang on, it's 8.
So the upgrade costs
8,
1.
9. The upgrades 1. So it's 10 points with the upgrade.
Yeah. For defense 5, but extra movement versus defense 6 of the Urukai warrior and standard movement.
I mean, it's not bad. I mean, I always like 8-inch moving, like the good to bad berserkers and all that. I mean, have either of you really had a lot of success with Marauders? Because I kind of feel like they just die.
Yeah, that's kind of been my experience as well.
Same. Unless you have like an entire army of them. Like,
well, then they just die en masse.
Well,
yeah. Well, I think he means the Ogog Scouts Legendary Legion, which you have orcs plus them, but then they get +1 to wound, and so that's a very big bonus to be getting.
Well, sometimes they get a +1 to wound. It's fairly hard to actually achieve.
Yeah, because they got to both be in contact.
They have to both be in contact, and then the orcs in that legion only move 6, which means that the Urukai scouts are running ahead and dying, and then the orcs show up and die.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. Like for me personally, I actually would like to keep the berserkers if possible. Well, okay, I don't really care about the berserkers necessarily. Like you can get rid of them, that's fine. But they do add something that can it kind of operate as a fearless unit to go tag a fell beast or whatnot. But reasonably, I'm just failing to see what the Maher and the boys are doing. Like I get it. Like he says in his little review that he's using them outflank and chase objectives. But then I'm like, you already kind of have Warg Riders for that.
Mm-hmm.
And now a Corbane.
I mean, what Maher's warband is good for is when the lines clash, they're on a flank and they're the guys that kind of run around the flank and get into the second rank of the shield wall and trap a whole bunch of folks. So I kind of get why they're there. I agree with you that it's somewhat less clear that he's got enough stuff other than Maher to kind of be the anvil to that hammer.
Yeah, I just don't see a lot. I mean, he's got basically 5 ranks. It looks like he's putting he's got so I actually think I think the pikes are all supporting one shield. I think he's got the berserkers kind of off to themselves. I mean,
he's got some crossbows in here too that can also stand in front of the pikes.
Yeah, and that's true too. So reasonably, he's just got a list that it would be a decent size list if it wasn't for the fact that he has these expensive low defense troops that kind of can be attacked. But I mean, if he does hold them back in the right way and doesn't just immediately send them up as a frontline infantry, it does it like that flanking maneuver you just mentioned, then yeah, I guess I can see that working out better for him. Then in which case you take out the berserkers, add the Corbane, Grima. I mean, he's got it's 39 total miles. Sorry, I thought I saw 36. 39 is actually right where you should be at a 750 point list.
Yeah.
He
could. I mean, if he wants to keep the berserkers, I think your suggestion of getting rid of the Warg Riders and replacing him with a Corbane. I mean, you'll need to find some extra points somewhere, and so maybe you get rid of like 1 berserker and 2 Warg Riders to do that, or maybe you drop a couple of the scouts. For example, he's got these Urukai scouts with Uruk bows that don't seem to have the Marauder upgrade.
Which then at Y at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Move and shoot.
Yeah, but they're moving slower. They're moving 3 incisions shooting instead of 4.5. So I'm kind of scratching my head about them. So I mean, they may be something that could get dropped and so just leaving Maher with kind of this small warband of 6 Marauders that are going to kind of run around to flank.
I think he felt uncomfortable with the fact that he only had 5 crossbows, and so he wanted to add more shooting power. I'm assuming that's where he's going with that.
Yeah, but I think bows are not going to do very much most of the time.
Yeah. I think Saruman combined with 5 crossbows is probably enough. It's enough to bring somebody else towards you if he doesn't have much shooting, and if the other guy has a lot of shooting,
it's going to outshoot this anyway.
As Mick said, the 3 Urukai scouts with Uruk bows aren't going to kind of tip the balance. You're going to have to go toward him anyway.
Yeah. So Maher, does he have March?
Yes.
But so does Ugluk.
Okay.
So does Ugluk. Ugluk has March and Strike. He's one of the few heroes that does that.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Then yeah, Uglug is definitely probably the pick here. So I
Yeah.
didn't
Also,
realize he had both.
Ugluk has an extra might point over Maher. I don't really ever see the point of picking Maher unless you're taking a ton of scouts personally, or if it's in the Legendary Legion. Like if you compare the two, Ugluk has more might, has a strike, has a special rule which gives you an extra cool stand fast in case Saruman's busy.
If you ever need to use it.
Yeah. Whilst Maher just has an extra attack.
Yeah, I'm leaning toward Uglug on this one. I mean, you lose the Marauders, but
Yeah,
then in
of
that
course.
case, I mean, I'm kind of like, can you not flank with like something else? Look, here's the thing: a Marauder is 10 points. For one more point, you can get a Warg Rider. Like, why not just flank with Warg Riders?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
So I'm almost like, if you really, really want to do this option, I mean, I get it. The Marauders have smaller bases, which allow them to kind of be a little bit more maneuverable. But honestly, I'd see the value in 6 Warg Riders over 6 Marauders, which is absurd. I still wouldn't pick 6 Warg Riders. I think our advice would be then to shrink down your number of Warg Riders. But like, honestly, that's kind of what I'm noticing here, is that I would rather have 6 of them than these 6 Uruk-hai scouts.
I mean,
and then combine it with Luglug.
Yeah, see, I would rather just add more warriors with shields too. So let's say half of the scouts into warriors with shields, the other half into Warg Riders. I probably wouldn't take more than like 4 Warg Riders total in the whole list.
Yeah.
And then if I had that many, then probably no Creebane. But if I wanted a Creebane, then probably like 2 Warg Riders.
Yeah, I think I'd rather. I want to have at least one Creebane, because, by the way, the Creebane, if you're looking for somebody to run around to the backside of the battle line and contact people and trap them, yeah, the Creebane is the thing to do that with.
I mean, it's like one of those times when we had the duel here on the channel, and I had like 15 Creebane, and I was playing against Matt, and I was crushing him with that.
I still would have taken you apart.
So I think, Ian, I think that's really our advice. Is, unfortunately, as much as you want Maher, I think Maher's place is definitely in the legions. Those legendary legions you see, it's the same as like taking Dunlendings outside of the Dunland Legion. There are certain Dunlendings anyway. It's like you could do it, but just take an Uruk-hai. So basically, I think in this case, you should replace. You can consider keeping the Berserkers, but if you don't, definitely somehow get Grima or the Creebane in here without reducing your numbers too much, and then eliminate Maher's warband entirely. Just go with Ugluk and bring in a few more wargs, maybe to do that flanking. But ultimately, like they said, probably Creebane all can function with that. And then take away your crossbow Uruk-hai. Just all the scouts. Just eliminate the scouts. It seems like we're agreeing here. Am I correct on that, guys?
Yeah, I think that's where we come down. I mean, the alternative to eliminating the scouts is eliminating the Berserkers, but I think one or the other has to go in favor of Greenlands and Creebane.
Just one final question. I'm thinking, what are we thinking about Thrydan Wolfsbane himself? Because
I like him.
He is 95 points mounted.
Yeah, no, I think he's well worth it at 95 points. I mean, he's the hitter in this list.
Yeah.
The only comparative person is Lurtz, but I think the role he's trying to have with Thrydan is to kill heroes quickly. Now, the only issue I have with Thrydan is I think he's permanently armed with a 2-handed axe, right?
And he's got a
sword.
Oh, he has a sword. Okay, so then I guess he's fine then. Yeah. So, then I mean, the only one who's competing with that, but Thrydan hits much harder than Lurtz does.
Mm-hmm.
So for the purposes of what he's trying to do here, I think Thrydan fits the role a little better.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason, I mean, Lurtz has some special rules that come with him about his, that affect the ability to come on the board in the maelstrom of battle scenarios, which are really useful. But other than that, I think Thrydan is kind of, if you're just looking at combat power, I think Thrydan is the better choice.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
All right. And so that completes the list review. So now we go on to the faction. And so while basically in this, what we're going to do is we're going to have Matt and Mick take turns reading off the different profiles. We're going to be discussing them as far as their value they bring to the faction and, just everything pertaining to it from a competitive standpoint. So Matt, go ahead and take it away with the very first survivor of Laketown and probably the Only possible auto include.
Yeah. No, there's two auto includes in this list.
Wait, before you begin, how about the army bonus?
Well, actually, let me talk about the army bonus in the context of
sure.
Bard, because it basically is an army bonus for Bard.
Yeah.
All right. So Bard the Bowman is very much the centerpiece of this list, as one would expect. He is 140 points. He is a man Laketown infantry hero. He is a hero of legend, so he can stuff 18 survivors of Laketown into his warband, although fairly often you'll be taking some other folks in his warband. He has a move, his normal move of 6 inches, although he can take a horse. He's fight 5, although that can go up. He's strength 4, defense 4, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 6, 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. He has a sword and a great bow. The great bow has a strength of 4. His options are a wind lance for 75 points, which we'll talk about in a moment, but probably after we talk about it. That's the last time you'll ever consider it. He can get a horse, and he can get armor for 5 points. You almost always see him on his horse and with his armor, because you want to get his defense up to 5. And he has some special rules. The first rule is rapid fire. So if Bard the Bowman hits a target with his great bow, hits, not necessarily kills, but just hits. He may take another shot at another target within 3 inches of it, or it may be the same target. If that shot is also a hit, he may shoot again up to a maximum of 3 shots in total. So he actually has shooting power, especially since he's shooting at strength 4, that can come close to Legolas. Although he doesn't have the auto hit feature, his ability just to gun down ordinary warriors can be superior to Legolas because of that strength 4 bow.
So Bardalas.
Bardalas, yes.
With much more.
With more, yeah. Okay, the next special rule is the Black Arrow, which is only used in conjunction with the Wind Lance. Once per game, Bard the Bowman can fire his Black Arrow instead of shooting the Wind Lance normally, if you choose to do so. You declare that he's going to fire his Black Arrow before rolling to hit. When shooting the Black Arrow, he re-rolls his failed to hit rolls and any failed in the way tests. Furthermore, do not roll on the scatter table when firing the Black Arrow. A successful to hit roll against a battlefield target automatically counts as dead on. And lastly, the Survivor of Laketown special rule. This is the special rule that is the one that you take Bard for. The first part of this sounds a bit odd when you read it. Bard the Bowman stand fast rule has a range of 6 inches, just like every other hero. This will be important in a moment. Furthermore, Bane, son of Bard, Percy, Hilda-Bianca, Laketown militia captains, and Laketown militia within 6 inches of Bard the Bowman. Basically, all of the heroes you can take in this list, except for Bard himself and I believe Alfred the Counselor.
And Gandalf also does.
And Gandalf, yeah. Receive a +1 bonus to their fight value and count as being in range of a banner. So this brings us to the army bonus. So right now we've got Bard as a 6-inch banner and +1 fight value buff. The army bonus is any man who wants to give their last, follow me. Inspiring words if ever there were one. Bard the Bowman stand fast will affect other Laketown hero models. That's great. Additionally, Bard the Bowman's Savior of Laketown special rule has its range increased to 12 inches instead of 6 inches, which means that his stand fast then goes up from 6 inches to 12 inches, and his banner goes up to 12 inches. So he becomes not only Bardalas, but Bardrihil. As well as his +1 bonus.
Bardomir Bardalas.
Yeah, something like that. So as you can see, a whole bunch. Bard is the centerpiece of the army because he makes almost the entire army fight better than it would ordinarily, and in fact, significantly better, because there's going to be basically a 2-foot diameter zone of +1 fight value and banner. I will, because I have to, because it's sitting on the page, talk about the Wind Lance briefly. The Windlash is a small siege engine. It is strength 10, defense 10, 3 wounds. So it's actually a pretty good siege engine as siege engines go. Bard is the only crew, which means that if he ever wants to move this thing, he needs some buddies to like pick it up and carry it along. Bard can abandon it if he wants to. I believe, unless they've FAQ'd this, he can shoot this thing from a horse. There's nothing that says that.
I think they did FAQ it, yeah, because it was well known that he could do that, but then they FAQ'd it where you must be on foot. Yeah, I think
you have to be on foot. Okay, all right. So that makes a little more sense. So generally, you're not going to be taking the Windlance if you're going to have Bard on the horse, and usually you want him on the horse because this is 75 points for a siege weapon that has no additional effect. So there's no area, there's no like 2-inch burst radius on this thing. It doesn't have piercing shot, so it's not pushing people back. It is accurate, so it's only going to scatter by 3 inches rather than 6 inches. But the Windlance is really something you only, I think, want to take in scenarios against Smaug, or if you know that like Gullivar is going to be your opponent.
I remember you talking about like once the Windlance being an interesting use for it is having Gandalf compel a major hero from the other side away from his army, and then you just instant death him.
Yeah, that is something you can do. So, but you've also got you've got the Black Arrow rule now that can essentially do the same thing. You don't need Gandalf to pull people away anymore. Because when you shoot the Black Arrow, you basically have one shot where you're rerolling everything. And with Bard and Alfred in the same list, we'll talk about Alfred in a moment. He can use his might on this roll, so you have potentially 6 might to go into this thing. So, I mean, the advantage of the Windlance is as long as you have an opportunity to shoot this thing before the lines meet, you can pretty much guarantee yourself a hit on just about anything on the board once. So if you know you're going into a game where like Gullivar is going to be the centerpiece and you want to auto kill him, this is the thing to do it. But in general, just because of the massive amount of points that you have to sink into this thing, 75 points, and the fact that eventually you're going to be throwing the thing away and Bard's going to start fighting.
And
And Bard loses
I
a
can
horse.
understand. I don't think anyone actually brings the Windlance into competitive formats, so I think anyone listening here would probably agree that thing is probably not what you want with him. I think Bard is essentially, as you probably all heard us say, he's pretty much an auto include. I mean, this is not the character you like. If you're playing Laketown without him, then it's probably because Laketown is an ally being supplemental to something else, like Thranduil's Halls or I don't know.
There was a tactic until the last edition where what you would do is take a captain and Alfred and a few Laketown guys and then just ally it into a random list. And then Alfred would make that captain into a 5 might captain. And then you would go from there. But they've changed that now because of who Alfred can. I mean, I think you need to have Bard in this list in order to take Alfred,
either him or
so
Gandalf.
do that.
Big allies, yeah, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, let's see.
This really, is kind of avoidable. I feel like they just have to change Alfred's profile because he's a bit crazy, which we'll get into.
So I think and we'll talk about this when we get to the FAQ. I think there has been a change with Alfred's profile that says he must be taken with Bard, but let me dig into the.
Oh yeah, that's right. The FAQs, I think, may have actually changed that.
Right.
So, I mean, for anyone listening here and has not experienced Survivors of Laketown, there are actually 2 more upgrades to Bard that are not listed in his profile itself. You're going to talk about Alfred a lot, and you'll get into why. Mm-hmm. We also have his daughters whom are in the list, whom upgrade him even further. So this character becomes, with the combo of all 3 of them, one of the most powerful characters in the game, mirroring essentially a mix of Boromir, Legolas, and Thorn Oakenshield. I don't know, but it's some of Elendil stuff all at the same time. He gets pretty powerful. Combine that with the fact that he provides banners and standfast. Yeah, I think we definitely would have to go into the rest of the profiles to fully talk about him, but let's just say this. I mean, reasonably, you're never not including Bard with all his glory.
That's right.
Yeah. So, by the way, in the errata, we'll talk about Alfred in a moment, but in the errata, there is a rule that states Alfred may only be included in an army that includes either the Master of Laketown or Bard the Bowman. So, to get Alfred, you need Bard.
You must have those two.
Yep.
So that gets around the whole Captain plus Alfred.
Right. Yeah, that is a thing of the past.
Yeah. Can I just mention that the whole thing with a banner of 6 inches and then 12 inches with a special rule with the army bonus, like you might not think that's much because it's just a banner, but at the same time, if you consider the fact that, let's say, in a normal combat between between a warrior of Laketown supported against something that has a higher fight value, if neither side has a banner, you're winning only about 4 out of 10 fights. Suddenly, if you do have a banner, then it's pretty much a coin flip. I believe it's something like 47% chance of you winning the fight versus 2 attacks on the other side with higher fight. And so if you consider the fact that you now are giving this to your entire army, not just 6 inches, but like 12.
Which is basically the army.
You suddenly almost increase your fight value to like fight 4 or fight 5, almost by default, because of how the math works out. So then suddenly your 6-point peasants are suddenly able to beat back elves on the basis that A, there's more of them, and B, with these banner rerolls, they're pretty much winning the same amount of fights as the elves are.
That's actually an excellent analysis of it. I actually like that one. So,
yeah, the force Bard, probably more than any other figure in the game, he probably has the biggest force multiplier effect for his army.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the conundrum of Bard, because as we'll talk about in a moment when we get to his kids, Bard actually is a significant heavy hitter. And there's always this trade-off of, I have all this combat power in Bard and I want to use it. But on the other hand, I can't afford to let him get into a situation where he's going to get killed, because once Bard gets killed, this whole army falls apart. And Bard can die because he's only defense 5. I mean, he's got 3 fate, but he's only defense 5. So if he takes a big punch or he gets knocked off his horse and onto the ground, he can go down. And once he does go down, that's generally the game, unless you've already kind of sewn it up somehow.
This list highly benefits from also having a wizard, in which we'll discuss briefly, probably, because he's not actually in this list. He's in the list, but not like in the actual book list. But he, without him, otherwise he's really susceptible to magic. Even with him, honestly, if you have enough magical firepower, if you can just somehow neutralize Bard, he takes the army down with him for the most part. Making him stand still, he still provides the banner effect and all of that. So you actually have to kill him. But honestly, anyone playing against this army should be making killing Bard the absolute priority, because, as Matt said, like, it doesn't function at all without him. I mean, you can kind of make it work, but for the most part, it doesn't function anymore. I think, I guess, we're probably going to be talking about Bard through 3 other profiles. So I suppose we can just move to the next one with Mick. What's the next profile that we have?
So the very next profile in the book is the 2 daughters, Sigrid and Tilda. So you're paying 30 points for both of them. They're independent heroes, which means most of the time they'll be coming inside Bard's Warband. Sigrid has fight value 2, strength 2, defense 2, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 4. And Tilda has fight 1, and this strength 2, defense 2, 1 attack, 1 wound, and courage 3. They both have 0 might, 1 will, and 2 fate points. Sigrid and Tilda may only be included in your army if it also includes Bard, obviously, or Bane, Son of Bard. Sigrid and Tilda may only be in either Bard the Bowman's or Bane's Son of Bard's Warband, and not the Warband of another hero. They are both unarmed, so they always suffer -1 to win and to wound. And then their special rules are down here. Bard the Bowman and Bane, son of Bard, receive a bonus of +1 to their fight value if they are within 6 inches of either Sigrid or Tilda. If Bard or Bane are within 6 inches of both Sigrid and Tilda, when Bard or Bane receive a bonus of +1 fight value and may call a heroic combat each turn without expending might points. So in summary, if both of them are within 6 of Bard, he gets +1 fight into fight 6 and gets to call 3 heroic combats each turn. Then the second special rule is something to fight for. If either Sigrid or Tilda are slain, Bard will automatically pass all courage tests. Yay! Additionally, when Bard moves, he must charge the model that killed his daughter if possible. If this is not possible, Bard must move as close as possible to the model that killed his daughter. Once the model that killed his daughter has been slain, Bard must move as fast as possible towards the nearest visible enemy model for the rest of the game, charging if possible. It is possible for 2 models to be the target of Bard's rage if both Sigrid and Tilda have been slain. In this case, Bard will target the closest of these 2 models until it has been slain, following which he will immediately target the second model. Once both models have been slain, Bard must continue to move as fast as possible towards the nearest visible enemy model for the rest of the game, charging if possible. So basically, if one of these girls dies, Bard goes crazy. He will try to kill the killer of the girls. And then if the killer is dead, then Bard will just go into combat everywhere whenever possible. So this is one of those situations where they have a very, very good bonus to Bard in that he gets to call his 3 heroics and becomes fight 6. But if either of them goes down, Bard may just go crazy and basically give the game away by going in the wrong place at the wrong time, getting himself surrounded and dying.
You know what? Honestly, this is one of the more interesting aspects of Bard because it kind of creates a new way to deal with him. But at the same time, like he's so powerful with these girls that I very rarely see anyone not play with them. Do you guys ever think there's a time where you would not bring the girls if you could afford it?
Maybe. But only if like I had like a double wizard lists or something like that.
Yeah, there's certain lists you wouldn't want to play against and have the girls, but I think most of the time you bring them. I mean,
most of the time you bring them, yeah.
I mean, it is fun to have this kind of thought experiment of, what would happen if an attack by Azog's legions happened to coincide with Bring Your Kids to Work Day. So, it is kind of this fun little thing. And, it creates all these atmospheric little moments about how could you kill a child? And somebody starts targeting them, which occasionally you'll see this ring wraith on Fellbeast, being threatened by Bard and his entire army, but no, he's going to cast the black dart at the little girl in the background of the army.
This is very true. They're like the target all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Even catapult shots seem to just always go toward the women, the little girls. Here I
am, a Lord of Evil, up here on my Fellbeast, and there's this guy with a strength 4 bow who's continually shooting at me. But there's a little girl over there, and I want her dead.
Yeah, that's also where you might question Legolas's choices in life if he decides to snipe little girls.
I hate kids.
I actually applaud GW for even having the fortitude, I guess I'll say, to put children in the game.
That's right.
But basically, I mean, for those hearing for the competitive advice, I mean, these 2 girls are something you always take because with 2 fate, and the point of will is kind of irrelevant because most of the time if someone has compel or something like that, you can easily surround them with people anyway.
You can still resist the black dart.
Yeah.
And if
fate,
there's ring wraith on the other side, there's going to be like 3 or 4 black darts going their way throughout the game.
Or
they actually survive.
Like that.
In most fights, I find that these girls survive most most games. I don't know. Have you all I've played against survivors a lot, and they're actually annoyingly difficult to kill many times.
They are annoyingly difficult to kill, but one thing that does end up happening, and this is something to think about, particularly when you're playing with or against Bard, is what it means is Bard tends to fight around pieces of terrain like buildings. And the reason he ends up fighting around those buildings is the girls will be huddling behind the building, and Bard will be out, fighting somewhere within 6 inches of them. So if you're playing with or against survivors of Laketown and Sigrid and Tilda are running around, you should keep an eye on the board for where you think Bard needs to fight. And then you can either send if you're opposing survivors of Laketown, maybe you send your army someplace else so that you're not fighting amongst buildings. Or, if you are survivors of Laketown, maybe that's the key to where your defensive position is going to be, is someplace where Sigrid and Tilda have a covered position. I notice as I'm looking at this profile, they're one of the few profiles in this list that has the keyword of women. And I'm now curious to see who else has it.
Éowyn has it.
Yeah. Okay.
Éowyn has the keyword woman. And I think because Arwen has elf. Mm-hmm. So she's not a woman.
She's not a woman.
Basically, there is actually, when you use Gothmog, and you use his ability on men, it will not.
This doesn't work. That's great.
On them. As long as they're not an elf, then they have the keyword woman. So I believe as of current, that's just Éowyn and these girls. Hilda.
I would absolutely love if there was some special rule that went with the Witch King, where he was somehow more vulnerable to figures that didn't have figures that did not have the keyword men.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So that the women could get it. That would be great.
I think that's awesome. I'm like, I like the fact that they actually changed it to woman. It's kind of, there's so few of them in the game that it barely impacts anything, but it's it is kind of a unique little loophole.
Yeah. Well, maybe what you do is you say that the Witch King re-rolls his fate against figures with the keyword men.
Yeah. Honestly, I would say I'm surprised that they did it, only because man, in the context of man, I don't think it was trying to refer to gender. I think it's just all of man, whatever. And that's usually an old English saying to say all of humankind. So I am surprised, but I think they did that in today's modern kind of social times.
It would be great though to see some actual. I mean, the Gothmog example is a great one where it actually has an impact. I think that's great. Yeah, that's right. The time of men is at an end, but the time of women is still going on.
Yeah, still good to go. So I guess we'll get to the next profile that is also considered an auto-include with Bard, and or actually, is that the next profile? I think it's Bane, right?
Bane.
Bane's the next profile. Alfred is actually in the Survivors of Laketown list, but we probably should talk about it. If you want to.
Let's talk about Alfred for a second here, because Alfred, although in the Army of Laketown, it's where his profile is, he is huge in this list. So you absolutely want to bring him up. Matt, do you have his profile in front of you?
I do. So Alfred the Counselor is 20 points. He is man, Laketown, infantry hero. He is actually a hero of fortitude, but I believe
he drops to independent.
Yeah, he's an independent hero if taken as part of this list. So he can't,
which is great. That's actually a good thing.
Yeah, because it means he can show up in Bard's Warband where he always shows up. And so he's move 6, fight 3, strength 3, defense 3, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3, which is actually surprisingly good, I think, for him. 0 might. Let's put an asterisk next to that for right now. 3 will and 1 fate. He is unarmed, so he's probably not killing anything, but you take him because of his special rule, dubious counsel. Alfred can choose to expend any number of will points at the start of the priority phase before any dice are rolled. For each point of will he expends, nominate a single friendly Laketown hero model within 6 inches, and it has to be a Laketown hero model. So so he cannot give his will to Gandalf or any allies or anything like that.
Not anymore. Like back in the day, giving 7 or 9 might to Legolas and then shooting away.
Hey, there's nothing better than having a 6 might wizard running around. Within 6 inches, so you roll a d6 for each point of will he expends. For each roll of a 2+, the hero that he nominated gets a might point. On a roll of a 1, he steals a might point from that hero and gives it to himself. And so usually what ends up happening is there's basically about a 50-50 shot that you're going to get all 3 of these rolls off, in which case you're going to end up with a 6-point bard or, conceivably something else. But usually now that you can't dump them into Gandalf, you're dumping them all into bard. And you could end up with the possibility of a 4-might bard and a 1-might Alfred the Counselor. You could have a horrific outcome and end up with a 2-might bard and a 2-might Alfred.
A 0-might bard and 3-might Alfred. If you pull on.
It's possible, by the way, very unlikely.
Yeah, anybody out there, let us know if that's ever happened to you. I don't think I've ever seen that happen, but
I've never seen it.
No.
But most people, their first action
if it did.
Game, I mean, the because of the rarity that Alfred actually takes might from you, most actions in the beginning of the game is just to take all of the will and just immediately dump it in the bard. The biggest reason people do that is because if you do that, it happens in a priority phase, so therefore it's unstoppable. You can't do anything, sap will, nothing. So if you just do it right in the beginning of the game, then other than in Maelstrom missions where he's not capable of doing that on that very first turn, then it's just a way to secure Alfred's use. After that, Alfred is just some guy who wanders around, and
right.
Yeah, that's his purpose. Unless you strengthen will him with.
You can have Gandalf, which never seems to happen because you always seem to have a better use for Gandalf than a 50-50 shot of strengthening Alfred's will, unless the other guy's just sitting on the other side of the table. But
some people will ally in Bomber, but I actually don't find that to be the best use. Honestly, 45 points just to potentially recharge Alfred.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, I think you do it all in the first turn. I've seen some people who only do it like 1 might or 1 will point at a time. But I mean, I guess there's certain armies against which that's safe to do. I never quite understood the purpose of that anymore. But
there's sometimes possibilities where you may want to give a might point to a captain because the captain has a heroic march and bard doesn't.
Yeah.
I've played against some people who would give 1 to bard, give 1 to captain, and then keep 1 back in case they wanted to give another 1 to captain for another march. But it's very rare.
Yeah, I was going to say, but on the other hand, when are you going to use more than 2 marches? That's pretty rare on this list.
Yeah.
This is a list also, especially if it takes Gandalf, that can get away without a heroic march. Just because it's got a lot of firepower, so it tends to drag armies toward you, and it's got a lot of numbers, so that it can, it doesn't depend on having like a few guys that run out and grab a couple of objectives. It has enough mass that it can kind of move to various points on the battlefield, especially with a 12-inch banner. So I don't know. I mean, I think 9 times out of 10, you're just dumping all 3 of your will points into Bard on the first turn of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, basically Bard becomes, he starts off 165 points because you give him armor and a horse and a bow, or I think he already has a bow. And then he immediately jumps to 20 more points, so 185, because you're always taking Alfred. Unless you guys disagree.
Yeah, I think that's right.
He starts 155 with armor and bow, with armor and horse.
Armor and horse, yeah. He's
55.
155, then you tack another 50 points on, and he's like 200
Yeah,
points.
Basically another 50 upgrade.
205.
205. So effectively, that is him. And for the most part, you should almost think of his profiles, just those 2 characters are upgrades to him. I mean, reasonably. So I think at all points levels, I would do that, except for like maybe at 600, you sacrifice Gandalf and you just keep Bard. But I still think you would do this still. So we're not going to go into Gandalf's profile. He's in a lot of other lists that we will discuss. So
and hopefully by the time this comes out, you will have heard our discussion on the Wizards podcast. So
yeah,
and so refer to that.
Well, there's one thing worth noting in that Gandalf actually gets to lead troops here, and he gets to take 15 Laketown warriors with him.
Right.
So
which is why you see Gandalf. Honestly, I think that's the trifecta you always see. You always see Gandalf, that Bard, at like, especially at 800, 750, 800 points, you always see those two together. And it used to be that you could make Gandalf your leader, and that way have Bard safely go around. But now Bard is the hero of legends. So you basically have Gandalf there supporting Bard, which makes it an excellent like combo. So because those are two pretty strong heroes doing that. So so we'll go into the next character, which is Bane, and I think Mick,
he's the other kid.
Yep, he's the other kid whom we didn't say
kid,
was
really.
an auto include, and we'll go into why. So go ahead and read it.
He is the only other character in this list who comes with a heroic strike, other than Bilbo Baggins. So someone might argue that you should take him because of that. But let's see. So he's 40 points. He's a man Laketown infantry hero, minor hero. Move 6, fight 3, strength 3, defense 3, 1 attack, 2 wounds, courage 4, 1 might, 3 will, and 2 fate. He comes with a sword. And whilst he is within 6 inches of Bard, he gains a bonus of +1 to his courage. And plus, additionally, Sigrid and Tilda, their rules also affect him. So if, let's say, he was within 6 inches of them, he would get another point of fight.
And in addition, he also benefits from the
combat.
Yeah, well, and he also gets the benefit of the Savior of Laketown rule from Bard.
Yes.
So if he is within 12 inches of Bard and 6 inches of Sigrid and Tilda, he actually goes up to fight 5.
He does, yeah. And he has a heroic strike.
Mm-hmm.
However, he is 40 points and only capable of bringing 6 models with him. Whilst there are other heroes in this list at 30 or 50 points, capable of bringing 12 models each. So Bane is definitely not the first character you would pick, but eventually there is a spot somewhere in this list for him.
Yeah, I think you nailed it dead on where that's the reason you don't pick him. He's points heavy for what he's doing, because even if you have him around the girls and Bard, he's still a fairly weak character getting that fight 5 and the hero combats. He gets free hero combats too, right? Like, I'm sorry, did I hear that right?
Yeah. So he does.
So realistically, what you're doing is you're realistically pairing him with another hero. But the problem becomes of which other hero is that, because Bard doesn't need Bane for that purpose. So the only reason he would use Bane for that purpose is if Bard is heroic striking, and then Bane is doing the heroic combat in the same fight. But other than that, there's not too many other characters that are going to really be able to deliver the hitting blow for Bard to be that Bane to be that supplemental, like, win the fight. You might say Gandalf charging in with Gramdring on horse. That's possible. It could be your play. But that's the problem I think most people are going to run into with bringing this particular character. There's nothing else. So, like, if you're allying, maybe if instead you decided to ally with, Thranduil, and you had Thranduil's halls and you have Thranduil running around, and Bane kind of supports him with that. But, like, that's probably about it. Like, otherwise you probably leave Bane out. Matt, have you ever seen any other use for Bane?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've played against this list a bunch of times, and I played against Bane a bunch of times, and he is, there's 2 uses for Bane. I mean, one is, as you say, going in with another hero, and I think, by the way, going in with Bilbo is actually a really good use for him. Where, like, Dane goes in the front, Bilbo puts in the ring, goes in the back, and then you trap a guy, and it could be an ordinary guy. And then
slingshot
you kill that
Bilbo.
guy. Yeah, you slingshot Bilbo. And then Bane can go on and, kill somebody else. Or just an additional heroic combat where, like, Bane with, a spearman behind him go into one guy, and he calls the heroic combat. And if they kill him, they kill him. And then he just moves on and can gang up on a second guy. And it's just, it's the free heroic combats are a really useful aspect of them. I think you do have to kind of think about whether you want to invest 40 points in doing that. But if you're like, you know what, I've got an 800 point list, I'm only going to take Survivors of Laketown. I think there is definitely a place for him and a way to use him.
Yeah.
All right. So reasonably, probably he's the pick after you've already selected Gandalf and Bard and and the girls and everybody else in Alfred. So
yeah, I mean, I will say this on the
hero in this list.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say this. There's a couple other heroes we're going to talk about in a moment, but something to consider in this list is who they ally with. And I think that's one of the reasons you don't see Bane more, is because this list comes with a lot of green allies. Basically all the, they can green ally with, all the Battle of Five Armies crew. So they can have dwarfs in this list. They can have Thorin in this list. They can have Thranduil in this list and still retain Bard super abilities. And that's why I think that's why you tend not to see Bane more, is a lot of times the third hero somebody picks with this list is a green ally. Obviously if you put Thorin and Goat in this list, that's a better free hero combat option than Bane is.
Yeah. I guess so I guess Bane aside, we're moving on to the next hero that Mick will read off.
So that's Percy. He is 50 points. He's a man, Laketown, infantry hero, fortitude. He is fight 3 with shooting value of 3+, strength 4, defense 4, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4. Then he's got 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He comes with a sword and a bow. He can call it heroic accuracy. And his special rule is archers this way. Percy and Laketown militia within 6 inches of Percy may reroll once to hit when making shooting attacks with a bow. So
I think, oh god.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. I just was like, an immediate thought was the 6-inch bubble radius that he has kind of forces you to go against our common advice. Normally on this channel, we often say, take your archers and split them into multiple different warbands so you can have multiple shooting lanes. Whereas Percy sort of tells you, no, don't take that advice and throw all the archers in his warband. I mean, is that something you guys have seen with him?
I mean, sure, but this army specifically is just such a bubble army with all these other effects, like the bard's bonuses, the kids bonuses, Percy's bonus, and then as we're gonna see, Hilda's bonus very soon, Gandalf's bonus. Everyone just tries to bubble up anyway. So
it's a pretty big bubble, right?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're significantly worried about being outshot and you want to stay within 6 inches of Gandalf, that bubble is 2 feet across. So you can have, and I agree. I mean, when you see Percy, you tend to see Percy with like a dozen, the 12 archers in the list sitting next to him, and they, kind of set themselves up where they've got a good arc of fire over, the approach route. And you've got kind of the, you've got kind of your shooting wing, which is Percy, that kind of sits off somewhere and shoots. Then you got your fighting wing with Bard, that's going to go in and hit people head on. And, Percy's best role is basically to take a bunch of archers, go off to the side somewhere and kind of shoot into the flank while everybody else is fighting Bard. And I mean, you do still have Bard's great bow, which is probably going to be someplace else. And that almost on its own is kind of your second, your second block of shooters. So because that great bow can do tremendous amounts of damage if you ignore it and you don't engage Bard. So you can do that where you split, Percy and his boys kind of off to one side, and then Bard, kind of in the middle or off to the other side, shooting and getting the other angle.
Yeah, I just realized another thing, and that's if Bard is mounted, he can be shooting easily from let's say 3rd or 4th rank because of how everything is positioned. Just in case people listening are not aware, so normally you would be shooting from behind your shoulder. So a 2nd rank model would be able to shoot over the 1st, but ultimately shooting is done through line of sight. So if you have a mounted hero shooting from somewhere where the line of sight is not obscured by any other lines, you can even be shooting from like 4th or like 15th rank if your target is clearly visible.
Yep. And that's the whole line of sight rules gets a little tricky because you can actually shenanigan that a lot depending on how your models are positioned. You often see people have high elves in the 3rd rank firing because they'll have like the way they're positioned, they're kind of like this sort of like So you see lots of people like turn their models sideways to get benefit from them.
The line of sight rules cannot die too quickly for my taste. It is
a bit of an absurd thing.
Some people even lie down.
Yeah. So what is the official? Is the official rule that you draw a line of sight from the head, and that's what
from the head?
Yeah,
it's from the face.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where Smaug gets tricky, because sometimes he's in range of firing at something with his fire breath, but he can't see it because his head is behind a building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta poke the head out.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember doing that because I was just playing a game where I had Gwahir, where I had to actually like position the model, because it's the new Forge World Gwahir, where he's kind of like he's leaning forward and doing something with his head, and he was like hiding behind a building, and it looked like he was like this giant eagle is poking his head out from behind the building, so he could see around to charge, but still get cover from the building.
It is definitely an ancient rule that sort of probably needs to go away.
Just measure base to base, and if any part of the base is obstructed, you get it in the way. I mean, and be done with it. You know how many games would actually like finish if they made that rule change?
So I guess regarding Percy, you're at a point now where we've already mentioned Bard is an auto-include. We've mentioned that Alfred and the kids are auto-includes. We mentioned that Gandalf is a very possibly include, most likely, if not auto-include. And then Matt touched on a great point, which is you're generally bringing an ally. So this is why you'll probably never see Percy. And so, and then you need a captain still.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are people who will just bring Survivors of Laketown, and that is a perfectly viable list build. Mm-hmm. I don't want to suggest that you have to take an ally with this list. True. And I think if you aren't going to take an ally, then I think Percy is probably the next one down on your list. Unless you have.
What about a captain for March?
Captain.
Well, actually, no. Matt made a good point, though. Matt made a good point about the shooting. Most of the time, you're bringing the enemy to you. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes, you don't have too much of a need to march.
Yeah, I'm actually okay in this list not having a march. I mean, the only time you really kind of run into problems with that is in Reconnoiter, but still you have enough figures that you can generally kind of like, my deployment is going to be board wide. So neither one of us are getting off, and we're going to fight a battle somewhere in the middle. Just because you got cheap dudes. So I think this is which is not to say that you don't want to take a march in some circumstances, but I don't think you need to. And generally, if you are doing pure Survivors of Laketown and you're gonna have Percy, you've got enough points to take a captain anyway. So it's not do I take Percy or I take the captain? Take both.
And that's I guess then really the toss up here becomes between Percy and Hilda, whom is the next profile here, which it seems like Matt's already on the side of take Percy. So let's find out why. Go ahead, Matt, read your Hilda's profile.
Yeah, and for the record, it's not because I'm a misogynist, but Hilda-Bianca is 30 points. She has the woman keyword, so she, like the girls, is not affected by Gothmog's special rule. Laketown infantry hero of fortitude, so she can bring 12 of her buddies with her. She's move 6, fight 2, strength 3, defense 3, 1 attack, 2 wounds, courage 5. And then 1 might, 1 will, 1 fate. She has a spear, so she can support from the second rank. Her heroic action is heroic strength. Meh. Her special rule is stand by our men, which probably isn't the best advertisement for feminism here, but that's what the rule is. If Hilda-Bianca charges, then during the ensuing fight phase, Hilda-Bianca and Laketown militia within 3 inches of her gain a bonus of +1 to wound if they charge that turn. So this is a change from the way it was before. The way it was before, Hilda-Bianca could support from the second rank and give this bonus to folks within 3 inches. Now she has to charge, and she's really not somebody you want in the front rank, just because she's fragile and she's only fight 3. And that, by the way, that fight 3 assumes she's getting the bonus from Bard. And it's only a 3-inch bubble of +1 to wound. So yeah, I mean, she's 20 points cheaper than Percy, but I think Percy's going to give you a lot more bang for your buck, especially since he's got 2 more might along with his special rule. So Hilda-Bianca is one of those figures where it's like, I'm doing 1,000 points of Survivors of Laketown, so I'm going to throw every figure in the list here, and then you take Hilda. I mean, you can make her work, you can do stuff with her, but you can probably find a better use for 30.
She gives up +1 to wound to all Laketowners, right? Like even the heroes?
No, Laketown militia and herself.
No, that's important.
And herself. Yeah.
It's
okay. Because I was about to say, I'm like, you pair with Bard or Bane, but then I'm like, oh yeah. So reasonably, yeah, this was a change from the previous edition. I think it's actually more thematic than it was before, because in the movies you see Hilda charging out first and then she dies pretty much immediately. And which now that's what's happening. She's going to charge out and just die pretty much immediately.
Fall next to our men.
Yeah. No, but they literally do get slaughtered. Like as soon as the lines clash, the just like start tossing them around. They just get all killed.
So taking Hilda-Bianca wasn't even a good idea in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, yeah, this is one of those profiles that, in the sake of being more thematic, they made her into this like 1 or 2 turn gimmick, assuming you can keep her alive. And so, which is fine. I suppose if they increased maybe the range to 6 inches or something like that, or made them all fearless, maybe that would have been, I'm not sure, but because that's ultimately what they did, right? She made them fearless rather than making them stronger. So that probably would have been a greater use for her. But as she's written now, yeah, you're probably not going to take her over a captain or Percy or just an ally.
Right.
Well,
what do you think, Mick? Have you seen a lot of use for her?
Well, would you take her over Bane?
No.
I would take her over Bane personally, unless you have the Bilbo combo that Matt was talking about. I personally would, because of the leading 12 troops. Mm-hmm. So that's her major use. That's what I would say. Yeah. If you're going to talk about a use for her, it's after you have all your might, which with Bard isn't very hard because you already have 6 points of might on him most of the time anyway. And then after you have another hero bringing an extra might, then if your goal is to bring troops in, but Percy's taking up 4 slots for your troops because he's 20 points more, well, then Hilda becomes an attractive choice to lead in more swarms of infantry.
Yeah, I guess she is 10 points cheaper than a captain. I will say that.
Yeah, but I think I would still rather have another captain to lead those 12 troops rather than Hilda.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It seems to me that like she's really fighting to have like the spot of the last hero you would ever take in this list.
Yeah, and she's just barely losing out to a captain who's only 10 points more.
Yeah. So unless you want to kill the Witch King.
For Hilda,
right? Because she's a woman.
Oh, there you go.
Or unless you're fighting as Gothmog. Okay, so
I'll say this: I personally would still see room to bring her over a captain. For 10 points less, sure, but realistically, a captain's usefulness is gone once he's out of might. So once those 2 might points, and yes, you have Alfred, I understand that, but most people are going to dump it on a Bard, and so a captain's usefulness starts to degrade pretty quickly after he burns out of might. Like after that, he's just a 2-attack warrior. Whereas if you charge Hilda at, let's say, the Witch King, I mean, the joke aside, if you were to actually charge into the Witch King and then maybe somehow get enough Laketowners onto a Fellbeast or a monster or something like that, they become a pretty viable threat in the fact that for that one turn, I mean, obviously if they lose the fight, then that's it. But for that one turn, if you throw her in there and have all those Laketowners, you could almost guarantee the kill. With all the +1 to wound on there. So it's an interesting option. I do agree that you're probably going to find more uses with her at March, even though, as Matt pointed out, you don't need it most of the time. But I think there is, she's not useless. I think that her role is really to bring in 12 more troops at a very affordable cost and then give you that one turn of +1 to wound.
I mean, there's also going to be situations where, let's say, you put her into a safe combat, because she's still on 2 wounds normally. So even if she was to lose that combat, let's say you get her into a random orc, give her support, and then all of your other troops within 3 inches get the +1. The next turn you do a similar thing of just put her into a very safe combat. So then you could get the bonus over several turns.
Also, do the Laketowners have to charge to get this bonus?
Yes.
Well, she has a charge.
No, it's the Laketowners do as well. They have to charge.
Yes, they have to charge too.
Which is, I mean, which is another part of the problem with this is if you lose priority, then
yeah. So her point of might is probably going to be only used to call heroic moves, effectively.
Yeah, probably so.
Maybe a heroic combat, most likely a heroic.
Yeah, I'd still rather take Bane.
I mean, you could always call it heroic strength, get yourself to strength 6, get the +1 to wound, and kill somebody.
There you go.
Right. But then you got to win the fight somehow with, fight 3 in one attack.
Okay.
So
you do get
as Mick said
Bard,
earlier,
actually.
you have a 47% chance of doing it. So, you're good. So I guess with her out of the way, then let's get to the one and briefly talk about the captain, whom we have alluded to several times here.
Well, wait a second. We don't. There's one more we need to talk
Bilbo.
about.
Oh yes,
you're right. I forgot about Bilbo.
Bilbo Baggins, Master Burglar.
Go ahead into him. What do we got with him? Because he's very different from his Thorn profile, the Thorns company profile.
He is. Am I doing Bilbo?
Yeah,
I can't remember which turn it was.
You did Hilda, right? So
I did Hilda.
Go ahead and read off Bilbo.
Right, so Bilbo is 90 points. Hobbit, infantry hero, hero fortitude. He moves 4, has fight 3, with 3+ to hit, strength 2, defense 6, 1 attack, 2 wounds, and courage 6, 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. He carries the 1 ring, mithril coat, and sting. Mithril coat means that he gets +3 to his defense, which is already included, so he's defense 6. Sting means that Sting is an elven-made dagger. Additionally, while carrying Sting, a model adds +1 to their strength when making strikes. So normally, Bilbo's strength 2, whenever he strikes, he's strength 3. His heroic actions are heroic resolve, strike, and defense. And then special rules. He is resistant to magic. He throws stones with strength 1 and range 8. And it has not yet awoken. The One Ring itself loses the negative side of it. So Bilbo ignores the Sauron's Will section of the One Ring. And if Bilbo is the only model left on the controlling player's side and is wearing the ring, he is not removed as casualty, as would normally be the case. So that second part will be very rare. But the first part, the fact that he ignores the side effects of wearing the ring, which is if you were to roll a 1 or 2, your opponent gets to control it. That's quite big because essentially Bilbo gets all of the benefits, but none of the downsides. So his opponents will always be getting their fight value halved, which makes Bilbo a very, very strong character here, especially in combination with someone like Bard, where if they gang up together against somebody, that somebody will very often just outright die. And as we mentioned before, Bane and Bilbo is also a potentially good combination because Bane can go to fight 5, and so Bilbo and Bane together will be drawing fights against even fight 10 on the other side. Plus, additionally, Bilbo has heroic strike, so even if he just goes up against anyone just by himself, if he's wearing the ring, anything of a 3+ on the heroic strike will always win him fights if they are drawn.
And he's got 3 might to do it with too.
Correct, and he is a hero of fortitude, so he also gets to bring warriors from this army list.
Yeah, because of all those scenes in the movie where he was rallying survivors of Laketown and leading. Oh no, wait, there are no scenes like that. Yeah, I don't know why he's a hero of fortitude, but he is.
I don't know.
I genuinely but he should be an independent character.
Yeah, he should.
The fact that he leads troops sets him into the highest tier of heroes here, not equivalent to Bard and Gandalf, but just below that, where he is
often the third guy that you take. Well, I mean, if we're setting aside Alfred and the girls as part of Bard, Bilbo is often the third guy that gets taken.
And we haven't alluded to him the whole video so far, but or this podcast so far, but yeah, he's pretty much makes him into what the Goblin King and Gollum are in Goblin Town army. It's as Mick said. The combo of him and Bard means that you will kill anything that these two go against for the most part. If you can get them both in contact with the same enemy. The 3 might is also another very welcome addition. Normally has 1 point of might, but he has 3 might with heroic strike. It's just like, well, I mean, he's fight 3 starting off, but he has the ring on, so it doesn't matter. If you roll a 5, then most heroes in the game, with the exception of the Balrog and Sauron, automatically will lose the fight against you.
And you also should keep in mind the recent upgrades to the ring and the invisibility rule. So now Bilbo can, put on the ring, and once he's got, there's no downside to putting on the ring. So he could put on the ring turn 1. Yeah. And then he could just run through battle lines. So it's much easier for him to get into contact with people than it was before. Particularly like, mounted heroes where he can run from one side to the other. The only downside with Bilbo is his 4-inch move, which means sometimes you can have trouble getting Bilbo into the right place on the battlefield, which means that sometimes you may actually want to take a captain in a list with Bilbo to make sure he can march to get to where he needs to be. Because oftentimes the battle will kind of drift away from Bilbo, and his short, stubby legs are too small to get him to catch up with, the key figure that he needs to try and lock down and kill.
I actually should clarify one thing I said. I said if you roll a 5, what I meant to say was if you roll to fight 5. So if you literally roll a 2 or higher, then you will outfight anything in the game except for Sauron and a Balrog. That's what I actually meant to say. So anyone who heard that, you roll literally on a heroic strike, any 2 or higher, boom, you win the fight. Yeah, that's absurd.
You draw a fight on 3+, you win the fight.
Yep.
Yeah, essentially.
And by the way, even if he's hooked up with, even when he's hooked up with Bane, because Bilbo has the Elven Maid dagger, even if nobody's calling a strike, you're still, and if somebody strikes against you to get up to and gets up to fight 10, you're still going to win that fight if you get to a 6 2/3 of the time.
Yep. That's nuts. That's totally nuts. And then he leads troops on top of it.
And then he leads troops on top of it. So having Bilbo as kind of your third hero after Gandalf is a perfectly reasonable way to go with this list. You just then really, placement of Bilbo becomes critical because he's just too slow oftentimes if you end up putting him in the wrong place to get to where he needs to be. And then 90 points is not cheap. That's 15 survivors of Laketown that you're trading in to get him. So you have to make sure that you get your points back out of him.
So if you're trying to hoard out, or you're probably a newer player at the game, you probably might feel more comfortable with a captain or Percy or someone else to bring in all these troops. Because if you do screw up with Bilbo, then that's basically, in an 800 point game, it's an eighth of your army that's just doing nothing. And that can be pretty bad. So I absolutely agree there. Also, if you get him killed, that's another thing. What is he? He's defense 6, 2 wounds?
2 wounds and 3 fates.
2 wounds, 3 fates. He's actually really hard to kill. Yeah. Especially with the ring on, because nobody's going to be shooting him. Nobody's going to be using spells against him. He can go down, but he's also pretty difficult to charge. So
it is kind of hard to kill him.
Yeah, it is.
But
he's tough to take down.
What about Ringwraiths? Ringwraiths don't really care about the ring being on.
No, Ringwraiths don't care about the ring. So
there was a lot of spells that can still go his way.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, and not only that, but a Ringwraith on a Fell Beast can ruin his whole day. A lot of what we're saying here does not apply against Ringwraiths, and that's a valid point. Or Sauron,
but it does against Sauron for some reason. Oh no, it doesn't. Never mind.
No, he doesn't have the ring. I don't think he has the ring.
He doesn't have the ring. If he Sauron, he has the priority in the ring.
Yeah.
So
you're better off with Hilda-Bianca if you're fighting the Witch King.
which of course you won't be able to make that decision mid-game. So.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so now we go into the captain's profile. What do we got with him? And go ahead, Matt. You can read him off.
Let me read him off. Okay, so Laketown militia captain. He's a captain. He's a fight 3 captain. So he's not going to be winning any duels unless Bard's around. But he's got a typical captain profile. He's got strength 4, defense 5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, 4 courage, 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He comes with a pick and a spear, so he can also support from the second rank. He has a heroic march, and he has the option to buy a shield. I think normally you're going to buy a shield because you don't want a fight 4. Defense 5 guy running around when you can have a defense 6 guy running around. But he's a standard captain, and I think you often see him in this list because he's only 40 points. He's pretty reasonably costed as long as he's within 12 inches of Bard. He is going to go up to fight 4, he's generally a good ad, and he's fight 4, 2 attacks. He's a guy you can stick in the second rank because he's got a spear. Those are always useful to have because he can have like random Laketown guy in front, and then he comes up behind the key place you need the fight 4 and gives it to him.
And he's the only heroic march hero in this list.
Yep, and that's probably the reason you bring him. Because the other characters are cheap enough where you can bring in like if you're just looking for 12 troops and you don't care if it's the heroic march, you should probably just bring Percy or Hilda or someone else. But if you're actually looking for that heroic march, and then that's pretty much your option.
Yeah. Some interesting dynamics. Well, okay, this is better discussion for Warriors of Laketown, so I'll bring it up then.
All right, so Warriors of Laketown, the only troop choice in this whole army.
The only one you'll ever need.
5 points. Yep. They are men from Laketown, infantry, and warriors. Move 6, fight value 2, shoot value 4. Strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3. They have an armor and sword or an axe. Their options are bow for 1 point, shield for 1 point, and spear for 1 point. And a special rule, which is actually quite a cool one. Onwards, men of Esgarth. Laketown militia that are within 3 inches of a friendly Laketown hero model who is in combat do not need to take courage tests for being broken. So this is a very cool rule in addition to obviously Bard's massive stand fast affecting heroes. These guys, if your opponent decides to charge your heroes after you've been broken, which is a very common tactic in most games, where once one army breaks, heroes get charged, troops run away. These guys don't really care about that because heroes get charged and these guys automatically pass courage tests.
Yeah, this is an incredibly powerful special rule because the way you break most horde armies is exactly as you mentioned with Mick. And this horde, it effectively a Survivors of Laketown list will fight to the last man. Like they absolutely
they will survive.
Yeah, they will survive. So they're not going anywhere, which is kind of unfortunate. So like beating this army, you really have to play them on scenario because that their troops are just not. Yeah, and already, Bard is always holding the army together anyway. Like, and if not Bard, then it's going to be Gandalf. At least stand fasting all over the place. So it's a very difficult army to defeat through breaking it. So, Matt, I know you had some commentary regarding.
Oh, I was just going to talk about what we just talked about, which is that this is an army that doesn't run away.
Yeah,
and it's an army that's also surprisingly difficult to kill until Bard goes down. Because these are cheap models at 5 points a pop. I mean, they're pointed at fight 2 models, but as long as Bard's within a foot, they're really fight 3 models that have a banner behind them always.
Yeah.
And the troops are essentially undercosted by a significant amount as long as Bard is on the table. I mean, Bard's really expensive, so that I don't think it necessarily makes the army,
Broken.
unfairly. Yeah, it's not a broken army, but you get a lot more out of these guys in conjunction with Bard than you otherwise would.
So, since we very often mention Goblin Town on this podcast, do we think that this is the best army to play against Goblin Town with?
To play against them?
Yeah, primarily because you have a lot of cheap troops who are significantly better than the Goblin Town troops. With your 2 attacks and a banner and higher fight value, you'll be winning about 70% of fights. You'll be killing on 4s, and you'll be able to have a swarm that's not as big as Goblin Town swarm, but essentially quite big. And at the same time, you have your Goblin King Gollum combo in Bard and Bilbo.
Well, not only that, but you take away
I was about to mention
the Goblin Town combo because Gollum doesn't have the ring.
Gollum's the last on the list of the tier list.
Yeah. Bilbo already stole it. I mean, I think we could get into a debate about whether this is the best town to counter best army to counter Goblin Town with. But I think it is clear that this is a very good army to counter Goblin Town for a variety.
I mean, just even despite Goblin Town, I mean, this army has what most armies ally to try to get. I mean, you have magical firepower, a strong, hard-hitting hero, hordes that actually are effective in fighting as long as the hero's around, at least. I mean, a lot of options that other armies need to ally to get, these guys already have kind of built in. They just don't have like a solid shield wall, but to be honest, like with the numbers you can get in this list, it almost doesn't matter.
I mean, you actually can get a solid shield wall out of this. I mean, you basically have a shield wall of orcs, all of which have banners behind them.
Yeah.
And you have enough numbers that you can go 2 deep pretty much all across the line when you need to. That's pretty tough.
So let's talk about what are the weaknesses of this list? What does this list really fear fighting against?
This list fears fighting against fight for high defense troops. Because that's when they lose the combats, and when they lose the combats, they do tend to die.
Yeah, the other thing is terror is also a bit of an issue. Although obviously, if you have a lot of troops yourself, it's fine to pass courage tests on multiple occasions. But that makes Black Numenorians especially annoying to fight against, because of terror. They have higher fight value, their defense 6, so you're bouncing away from them, and they're killing you on 5s, and you're killing them at them on 6s. So if they happen to have banners nearby as well, it may become a very difficult fight for you.
Yeah, I mean, they have the ability to ally in high fight or high courage stuff, and they also have the ability, because they have a whole bunch of shooting, to just sit there and say, all right, I'm not going to charge. Here's my shield wall. You can charge it if you want. And in the meantime, I've got Bard over here who's going to be heroic combating around and killing 4 figures a turn.
What I would say, just to add on to the final weakness of this army, is it has a heavy reliance on one character. Not only do you have multiple heroes that are essentially upgrades to that character, but your entire army falls apart if you lose that character. With that reliance on it, that means that if you have a lot of magical firepower, if you have a lot of shooting firepower, everything you send, every gun you have should be aimed right at Bard. Not even Gandalf, but
or one of Bard's daughters.
Or one of Bard's daughters,
course,
yeah. You can attack the daughters too. So that makes this list very, like, this is one of the reasons I don't consider this list broken. A lot of people will be like, oh, this list has everything, it's broken and whatnot. I don't consider it broken because of that major fundamental weakness. Normally, when an army loses its hero, it just loses a big hitter. You know, Númenor loses Elendil, okay, fine, but we can still press on. This army's not pressing on anymore. So you lose that leader, it's over.
The wings come off at that point.
Yeah, it's done.
Yeah, so
that's
ideally, if you have like 3 ballistas or like 3 ring wraiths casting 3 black darts per turn, then this army just dies. do play 3 ballistas or 3 catapults.
Well, I suspect if you have 3 rig wraiths casting 3 black darts per turn, what you do is you take the 2 girls, you put them inside a house somewhere, and then the rest of the army just swamps whatever, swamps the 3 ring wraiths and the 6 guys that they managed to save some points to bring with them. I think that's the answer. I mean, which you can do at a certain point is you can just, if you're in that zone where it looks like Bard's going to be targeted, is, Bard hides somewhere, and you let the rest of the army do the killing.
I mean, reasonably, hopefully you don't have to do that, because you are taking a potentially 6 might fight 6 or a combating Bard hiding him.
Well, yeah, I mean, but the times you're going to do that are going to be times when the threats out there are threats that he would probably have to think about taking on. And I mean, you can keep him safe, especially if you got Gandalf and Blinding Light. You can keep him relatively safe anyway, in a position where he's just shooting 3 times with his great bow. And, he's still going to affect the battle, and he's still going to be a force in being, where once you've kind of carved through and reduced the enemy's numbers, then you can bring him out with like 3 of his friends to take on that ring wraith.
And also, I mean, just going back to that his bow that he fires 3 times. Using might, you can easily knock out whatever priority target's threatening Bard. I mean, it's with 6 points of might, he can pretty much deal with whatever he needs to.
Yeah, if he needs to shoot down, if he can shoot down if he wants to shoot down a ring wraith, he can do it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the other thing is he can't shoot into combat. That's really the only advantage Legolas has over him in that field. All righty. So should we talk about a list?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. So this is an 800-point Survivors of Laketown Allied list. And the first figure in the list is, of course, Bard the Bowman. And he comes with his horse and his armor. And in his warband, he has his usual gang of friends. He has his 2 daughters, Sigrid and Tilda. He also has Alfred the Counselor to whisper sweet nothings in his ear. And he has 5 Laketown militia with spear and shield. He has 5 Laketown militia with shield. He has 5 Laketown militia with bow and spear. So he's got the full 18-figure warband. Then we have Gandalf the Grey. Gandalf the Grey is on horse, and he's going to be leading 14 Laketown militia. He's got 5 Laketown militia with bow and spear. He's got 4 Laketown militia with shield, and he has 5 Laketown militia with spear and shield. And then the third warband is Thorin Oakenshield, King Under the Mountain. And Thorin is on goat, and with Thorin are 8 Iron Hills warriors with spear and shield. And so this is an army that is designed to maximize heroic combats, because you've got Thorin Oakenshield and Bard with the girls who can both call heroic combats. They're the ones who are going to be doing most of the killing in this list. Gandalf is here to cast Blinding Light, protect them, and then if they get overextended and is trouble, Gandalf can, if need be, Sorcerer's Blast into those combats and keep them safe, just kind of knock everybody down around them. Just a couple points here is I double armed most of the figures in this list. You don't have to do that. That was kind of an artifact of the number of slots I had here. I filled all but 1 slot I could in Laketown. I had a few points left over. You could fill out that last Laketown militia slot. You could probably drop some of the extra stuff here and put it in, and get maybe an extra Iron Hills dwarf or 2. But in these lists, especially where we have Iron Hills, the Iron Hills are probably going to be going in front. So I wanted to have a lot of spears in my Laketown stuff so that they could slip in behind. And it is useful to have kind of shields on some of your spear guys, where if they have to, they can kind of go out to the flank and just kind of shield against somebody, get that 2 dice and a reroll against an opponent. And yeah, that the change from defense 4 to defense 5, I think, is often worth a point for these guys. So you could, I think, drop some of that stuff and maybe add a figure or two. But I thought the additional kind of defense across the line was worth it. I ended up with 43 models, and it is 9 might that is likely going to go up to 12 might once Alfred does his thing. And if I need to, I've got Gandalf who can pump up Alfred to try and get even more if I have some extra time. So that's the list.
So there's obviously the cool synergy of spearmen, of cheap Laketown spearmen supporting the Iron Hills dwarves, and again with Bard, those spearmen can also re-roll their dice in combat. So
that is correct. I mean, I have done some things in here. I mean, I have foregone a banner in this list because of that ability and precisely because of that synergy that you mentioned. And, I've also foregone a march in this list. And I think this list can get away with both of those drops.
As long as you keep the blinding light and your spear, like, enough bow fire, then, which is easy to do in Laketown, then yeah, I think foregoing march is perfectly fine. I think one thing that I've always found with Thorin a little underwhelming is that he doesn't have +1 to wound. So a lot of times he is bouncing off of like things that I don't want him to bounce off of, or not guaranteeing the kill. A lot of times I find if I really want him to guarantee the kill on the charge, he needs to be only fighting like 2 models, maybe 3 max. But that's just something about him, like in specific. I did this combo actually. In fact, I believe at one of your tournaments, Matt, a Shadow in the East tournament, where I brought Thorin and Bard, and I just was a little annoyed at how often Thorin might like not kill the target. I mean, has your experience been the same or not?
Yeah, sometimes he does. The issue though is because it's a free heroic combat that, if you go in and you win and then you only kill one of the 2 guys, it's like, meh. I mean, yeah. he's still defense 8, and his goat is defense 5. So, if he goes in and if you don't get the heroic combat off, then oh well, we'll do it the next time. I mean, that's the advantage of the free heroic combat is you don't have to get those things off. I mean, the other thing about Thorin is because he's a hero of legend, he can be the army leader if you want. So, and he's only got the 1 fate, but he is defense 8. So he's an army leader that's tough to kill, and that kind of frees up Bard to like not throw himself into suicidal situations, which is something you always have to worry about Bard in that free heroic combat is, if I do a free heroic combat with him and to get him into a position where he's going to get surrounded the next turn, that's something you don't want to do because your army can go down.
I think your point about splitting the army leader is actually a good one, though. I actually would do that because at least then Bard doesn't become the obvious target for all things. You can take the victory points and throw it on another character.
I mean, so it's not clear to me that you necessarily want to make Thorin the leader. You can for exactly that reason. The other thing you can do is because you have 2 heroic combats is Thorin can then be kind of your grenade that you throw in. And if he gets surrounded, well, that's okay. He'll probably lose his goat and then he's going to shield at defense 8 until the rest of the army comes and rescues him. And Bard is more conservative, but I can see an argument either way for who you're going to make the leader in this list.
There's actually another thing for about free heroic combats. Like, normally, if you are charging in, you're probably charging 2 enemies, calling heroic combat, hoping to win, kill, and move on. But if your heroic combats are free, there is an argument that you could just end up charging 1 enemy to ensure that you definitely win and definitely kill, and then use that combat to charge another 1 enemy. And that way you're actually maximizing your chances of winning those specific combats. Even though you end up killing just 2 models, and you...
That would have been the same though if you had not had the free hero combat and just charged 2 models. Then I can understand.
So it would be the
Well,
same. However, you are it's far more likely for you to actually win those combats if you're fighting against 1 instead of fighting against 2.
The other thing you can do is you can fight 1 in the initial combat and then go into 2.
Yeah, correct.
If you have that opportunity.
Yeah. Or you just charge 1 and then reposition your hero into a much better position for next turn, which is not something you would normally be spending might on.
Right. It also matters whether the guy that you're charging has a spear support or not. Generally, if they don't have spear supports, it's generally okay just to charge two ordinary models because you can take them down. It's when you're rolling into 4 dice that you start to have the problem, because the one thing that Thorin doesn't get is he doesn't get the banner reroll from Bard, and neither does Bard himself, which is something to think about. But Bard's got 6 might, so
it's a shame that Bard doesn't inspire himself. He should learn from other heroes like Isildur.
It's a shame Bilbo doesn't inspire Bard. It's just like he's inspired the other Laketowners and he brings them along.
I'm not sure. It's not entirely clear to me that Bard remembered who Bilbo was in this in this battle. He was just some short guy that he met once in a tent, and that is
actually very true. I
guess, somehow grabbed 12 of his warriors and started leading them around. It's like, did I put this guy in charge? What? I thought I left Alfred in charge. Who's this guy? Bard with 6 points of might can also kind of get away with charging 2 guys and then 2 guys because he's got the might to spend if he gets into trouble.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I guess that pretty much wraps up this whole discussion regarding Laketown. We'll obviously talk about some of the other characters and such in Alfred, more length, maybe an allies in the Army of Laketown version of this list. But I guess unless we have anything else, I suppose we'll stop here and we'll talk to you all very soon in the next episode.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Well.